The cold night was silent, broken only by the howling wind that swept through the dark, dense forest. The man sat by the campfire, staring into the flames, trying to keep warm. He had been hiking for days, far from civilization, and his only company was the flickering light of the fire and the stars above. The silence was comforting, peaceful even. He had been alone for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone near. As he sat, lost in his thoughts, a sudden movement in the shadows caught his eye. He stood up quickly, his heart racing. The figure was tall and slim, moving with an eerie grace through the trees. It was a woman at least. It looked like a woman, but there was something strange about her. Her skin was glowing faintly in the moonlight, almost as if it was radiating light from within. She had long, flowing hair that shimmered like silver, and her eyes, those eyes were unlike anything he had ever seen. They were a piercing shade of blue, so deep and intense that they seemed to see right through him. For a moment, he stood frozen, unsure of what to do. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Was this a dream, or was this really happening? He looked around, half expecting someone to jump out from behind the trees and laugh at him. But there was nothing. The woman was real, and she was walking straight towards him. "Hello?" He called out, his voice shaky. The woman didn't answer at first. She continued to walk, her steps steady and calm, as if she had no fear. As she got closer, the man could see that her features were sharp, almost otherworldly. She looked like something out of a storybook, a creature from another world. Her clothes were unlike anything he had ever seen before, a mix of metallic and fabric that seemed to shift in the light, as if the material itself was alive. The man's heart raced even faster. What was she doing here? How had she found him in the middle of nowhere? His mind began to fill with questions, but he couldn't find the words to ask. He wanted to run, but his feet felt like they were glued to the ground. He was both terrified and mesmerized by her presence. Finally, the woman stopped in front of him, her eyes still locked onto his. There was no fear in her gaze, only calmness, as if this encounter was completely normal. She tilted her head slightly, studying him in silence. For a moment, the man thought she was going to speak, but she remained quiet. "Are you lost?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. It seemed like the only thing he could say. The woman nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving his. She took a small step forward, and without saying a word, she gestured towards his tent. It was clear what she wanted: shelter from the cold, a place to warm up. The man's instincts told him to say no, to send her away. But something inside him stopped him from doing so. Maybe it was the loneliness, or maybe it was something else. But he couldn't bring himself to turn her away. "Come in," he said, his voice steady now, though his heart still pounded in his chest. "You can stay here for a while." As she entered the tent, the man couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a chance encounter. There was something more to her, something mysterious and dangerous. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that inviting her in would change everything. And so, the night began, but little did he know. What happened next would leave him questioning everything he thought he knew about the world. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the night sky, but inside the tent, an uneasy stillness settled between them. She sat across from him, her glowing presence casting strange shadows on the walls of the small tent. The warmth of the fire seemed to have little effect on the chill that lingered in the air around her. Her eyes, so bright and captivating, were fixed on him, studying him in a way that made his skin crawl. He could feel her gaze penetrating deep into his thoughts, as if she could see everything he was trying to hide. He shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say next. She had asked for warmth, but there was something about her that didn't seem to fit with her story. She didn't look cold, not in the way someone would after traveling in the wilderness. No, her skin shimmered with an unnatural light, and her movements were fluid, almost otherworldly. His instincts told him to be cautious, to keep his distance, but his curiosity was overpowering. Who was she? What was she doing here, in the middle of nowhere? The silence grew heavy between them, broken only by the soft crackling of the fire. She didn't speak, but her eyes never left his, her expression unreadable. He tried to focus on something else, but everything in the tent seemed to draw his attention back to her. Her long, silver hair fell in waves around her face, and when she moved, it seemed to flow like water, as if it was part of the very air around her. "Are you really lost?" he asked, his voice hesitant, but the question felt weak, inadequate. It was clear now that she wasn't just some traveler seeking shelter. She was something more, something that didn't belong here. She nodded slowly, but the answer didn't feel genuine. He could see the flicker of something behind her eyes, something dark, something that didn't match the innocence of her appearance. A shiver ran down his spine as she leaned forward, her gaze intensifying. He couldn't look away, not even if he wanted to. Her presence was magnetic, drawing him in despite the warning bells ringing in his mind. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked, his voice more forceful now, though he didn't know if he was trying to push her away or pull her closer. Her lips curled into a faint smile, and for a moment, he thought he saw something flicker in her eyes, something dangerous, something predatory. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a calm, almost serene expression. "You are interesting," she said, her voice low and smooth, like silk brushing against his skin. The words hung in the air, and a cold wave of fear washed over him. What did she mean by that? There was no way she could have known anything about him. Yet her words seemed to imply that she did. It felt as though she could see straight into his soul, reading his every thought, his every emotion. He fought the urge to stand up and back away, his mind racing with questions. Who was she really? Why had she come here? But before he could ask another question, she stood up, her movements fluid and graceful, as if she was gliding rather than walking. The tent seemed to grow smaller, the space between them shrinking as she stepped closer. He felt the air grow thicker, and his breath caught in his throat. What was she planning? What did she want from him? She reached out, her hand brushing against his arm, and in that instant, he felt an electric shock run through him. His heart raced, and for the first time since meeting her, fear took hold of him. There was something undeniably dangerous about her, and he had no idea what he had gotten himself into. She was no longer just a lost traveler seeking warmth. She was something far more complicated, far more mysterious, and in that moment, the man realized he might have made a grave mistake by letting her into his tent. The air in the tent was thick with an unsettling tension. The man watched her closely as she stood, her presence both calming and terrifying at the same time. His pulse quickened, and he felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity surging through him. Her gaze never wavered from his, and the more he tried to focus on anything else, the more drawn he became to her. There was no escaping it. She was unlike anyone or anything he had ever encountered before. She didn't say a word, but her eyes spoke volumes. They were filled with an intensity that seemed to see right through him, as though she could peel away the layers of his thoughts and expose everything beneath. He felt naked in front of her, vulnerable in a way he couldn't explain. His breath hitched when she moved again, taking slow, deliberate steps toward him. Her fluid motion was almost hypnotic. It was as if she wasn't bound by the same laws of nature that governed him. "Why did you come here?" he finally asked, the words escaping his lips before he could stop them. His voice was barely a whisper, filled with more confusion than defiance. He had to know. What was her true purpose? Her lips parted slightly, but instead of answering, she gave him a look that sent a chill racing down his spine. It was as though she were savoring the moment, watching him struggle to understand her. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was enough. "I thought you were lost," he added, trying to regain some control over the conversation. Though it was becoming increasingly clear that he was no longer in control, it was as if the rules of reality were bending around her, leaving him helpless in the wake of her power. Her smile was small but knowing, and for the first time, she spoke. "I was never lost," she said, her voice low and smooth, carrying a strange sense of finality. "I came here for you." The words sent a jolt of confusion and dread through him. For me, his mind raced to make sense of it. Had he misjudged the situation? Was she not lost after all, but looking for something or someone? Her words hung in the air like a cryptic riddle he couldn't solve. His heart pounded in his chest as she closed the distance between them. She was so close now, her scent faint but intoxicating. It was a mixture of something earthy, like the forest, and something otherworldly like the unknown. He couldn't stop himself from breathing it in. even as the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. She reached out and placed her hand gently on his chest, and his breath caught. The warmth of her touch seemed to burn through his clothes, a warmth that was both foreign and familiar. His entire body tensed at the contact, and he felt something stirring deep inside him, a sensation that was both thrilling and terrifying. "You don't understand," she murmured, her voice a whisper against his ear. "But you will." He wanted to pull away, to step back, but his body refused to obey. Every part of him, from the pounding of his heart to the quickening of his breath, was completely focused on her. The fear that had taken root in his chest was being replaced by something else, something darker, something he didn't want to acknowledge. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The shadows in the tent seemed to stretch longer, darker, as the fire crackled in the background, casting an eerie glow over her face. He realized, with a sharp breath, that he was no longer sure of what was real and what was illusion. He had let her in, and now there was no turning back. As her fingers lingered against his chest, the air grew even heavier, suffocating in its intensity. What had started as an innocent invitation for warmth had turned into something he could not control. And as she stared into his eyes, he knew with a sinking feeling that he was about to discover the true meaning of her presence, and that discovery might cost him more than he was prepared to pay. The silence in the tent was deafening now, thick with the weight of unspoken tension. His heart pounded as he watched her, still so close, her hands still resting on his chest, her touch like fire against his skin. His thoughts raced in a frantic blur, trying to make sense of everything, but they all crashed against the wall of uncertainty. He had made a mistake, he realized, a mistake that was rapidly spiraling out of his control. Her gaze was unwavering, like she was reading every thought that flickered through his mind. She knew everything he feared, everything he desired. And yet, she said nothing more, offering only the quiet, suffocating presence that seemed to consume every corner of the tent. The warmth of the fire barely touched him now. The coldness of her proximity was far stronger, colder than the wilderness outside. He tried to take a step back, to break free from the magnetic pull she had on him, but his body refused to move. It was as if the moment he had crossed the threshold of inviting her in, he had entered a different realm, one where his will had no power. She was the force, and he was simply caught in her orbit. "Why are you doing this?" he finally managed to choke out, his voice barely a whisper. It was a question that had been haunting him since the moment she stepped into his tent. He needed an answer. He needed to understand why his simple act of kindness had turned into this strange, suffocating encounter that threatened to consume him. Her lips curled into a smile, one that was both knowing and unsettling. She didn't answer his question right away. Instead, she leaned in closer, her breath warm against his cheek, sending a shiver down his spine. The world outside the tent seemed to fade away, the rustling of the wind and the crackle of the fire becoming distant, almost irrelevant. It was just the two of them now, trapped in this shared moment, in this web of tension that he couldn't break free from. "I told you," she whispered, her voice like velvet. "I'm not here for warmth. I'm here for something far more interesting." His pulse quickened. His instinct screamed at him to run, to get out, but his body wouldn't listen. It was as if her presence had frozen him in place, locked him into this strange, dangerous dance he didn't understand. Her hands slid slowly down his chest, each touch sending a jolt through him, making his heart race even faster. He couldn't pull away. He couldn't move. Her fingers traced the fabric of his clothes, drawing closer to his skin, and he could feel the heat of her touch through the layers. Every part of him was on fire, every muscle screaming at him to do something, anything, but he remained rooted. His mind clouded by the sensation of her proximity. "Do you know what you've done?" she murmured. The words were laced with a quiet power, like a promise or a threat. He didn't know which. But one thing was certain: whatever he had expected when he first saw her, this wasn't it. She wasn't just an alien seeking refuge. She wasn't just someone looking for shelter from the cold. She was something else, something far more dangerous. And now, he was tangled in her web. "I didn't think. I didn't know," he stammered, his words stumbling over each other. He was losing control, slipping further into a place he didn't want to be. He tried to fight it, but the more he tried, the more he realized that he was already too far gone. There was no escape now. With a slow, deliberate movement, she pressed her lips to his ear. "It's too late for regrets," she whispered. "You invited me in. And now, I'll make sure you'll never forget why." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating him with their meaning. His mind screamed for him to break free, to escape, but he was already trapped by her. By this moment, and by the force of her will. The night had just begun, and he had no idea what he had really brought into his life. The tension in the air was suffocating now, and with each passing second, it felt like the world outside the tent was slipping further away. The firelight flickered erratically, casting long, haunting shadows that danced across the walls, almost as if they were alive. He could barely breathe as she stood before him, her presence overwhelming in every way. Her beauty was still undeniable, but there was something else about her now, something darker, something predatory. Her gaze was locked onto him, unblinking, as if she were studying every single reaction his body had to her presence. Her eyes bore into him, and in the silence, he felt naked, exposed in a way that made him squirm with discomfort. He wanted to look away, to find something, anything else to focus on, but there was nothing. Everything in the tent seemed to swirl around her, and he was powerless to escape it. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked, his voice strained and filled with confusion. He was grasping for something, anything that could make sense of the situation. She had come into his life like a storm, and now it seemed like she was taking over, piece by piece. But why? What was she after? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a step closer, her movements slow and deliberate, as though she were savoring the moment. The tent seemed to grow smaller as she closed the distance between them, and he could feel the warmth of her presence, too close, too overwhelming. Her scent filled his senses, something sweet yet unsettling, like an alien perfume, unfamiliar yet magnetic. "I didn't think it would be like this," he said, almost to himself, as though he was trying to make sense of what was happening. His mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. She had asked for warmth, but he had known from the start that it was more than just that. The way she looked at him, the way she moved, she wasn't here just for shelter. She was here for something else, something far beyond what he had imagined. With a sudden, fluid motion, she reached out and gently cupped his face in her hands, her touch light but firm. The heat from her skin seemed to radiate through him, sending a shock of awareness straight to his core. His heart skipped a beat, and he froze, unable to move or speak. His body seemed to betray him, responding to her touch even as his mind screamed at him to pull away. "Do you understand now?" she whispered, her voice low and filled with an edge of amusement. "You invited me in. You thought you were offering kindness, warmth, but you were offering something far more precious." He tried to pull away, but his body wouldn't listen. He couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the strange sensation of her hands on him. The more she touched him, the more he felt like he was losing himself. His thoughts were spinning out of control, and the fear that had been simmering beneath the surface was beginning to rise to the surface, threatening to drown him. "You've made a choice," she continued, her fingers tracing along his jawline with a lightness that made him shiver. "A choice you cannot undo. And now I will take what is mine." His mind was reeling, trying to catch up to the realization of what she was saying. Was she threatening him? Or was she claiming something from him? He wanted to scream, to fight back, but his body was paralyzed with fear. Caught in her hypnotic grip, the silence stretched on, and he could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had thought he was helping a lost soul. He had thought he was doing the right thing by offering shelter, by showing kindness. But now, he wasn't sure if it was kindness she had wanted at all. She leaned in closer, her lips brushing against his ear as she whispered, "I've waited for this moment. Now you will understand what true power feels like." His heart thundered in his chest as the realization hit him like a freight train. This wasn't just an encounter, it was a test, a game, and he had unknowingly become the pawn. He had invited her in, and now there was no way out. What had started as a simple act of compassion had turned into something he could never have imagined. As the night wore on, he knew he was no longer just a man alone in a tent in the wilderness. He was part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous, and he had no idea how he was going to escape. The air inside the tent had grown unbearably thick, pressing down on him from all sides. His chest felt tight as he tried to catch his breath, his heart hammering in his chest. She was still standing close, too close, her presence consuming him entirely. Her words echoed in his mind, each one more cryptic than the last. "You've made a choice," she had said. "A choice you cannot undo." The weight of those words sank in deeper with every passing second. He had no idea how things had escalated so quickly. He had only wanted to offer shelter, to help a stranger in need, but now he felt like a fool. There was no kindness in her eyes, only something cold, something predatory. Her touch lingered on his skin, electric and unyielding, as if she were marking him, claiming him. He shivered under her gaze, his muscles still frozen, unable to break free from her hold. "Who are you?" His voice cracked, his throat dry as he struggled to find his words. He needed answers, needed to understand what was happening before it was too late. But the question felt useless. How could he expect an answer from someone who seemed so far beyond his comprehension? She finally stepped back, but her eyes never left him. There was a strange satisfaction in her gaze, a look that told him she had already won. "You still don't understand," she murmured, almost to herself. "You never will, but that's part of the beauty of it." He felt a chill run down his spine as her words sank in. What was she talking about? Was she toying with him? Or was there something far more sinister at play? His mind was racing, but the answers were slipping through his fingers like sand. He couldn't focus, couldn't think clearly. As she continued to draw him deeper into her web, her next words were sharp, cutting through the fog of his thoughts. "You've invited something much more dangerous into your life than you realize. I'm not just an alien. I'm not just someone looking for warmth. I've come to take what's mine. And you," she paused, her lips curling into a smile that sent a jolt of terror through him. "You're the one who will give it to me." He felt the world around him shift, the gravity of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. Was she saying that he was part of her plan? That this was all inevitable? His mind spun, unable to grasp what was happening. He had no way of knowing what she truly wanted from him, but in that moment, he realized that he had unwittingly become a pawn in a game much larger than he could possibly comprehend. And now, there was no escaping it. Her eyes gleamed with something dark, something far too knowing. He was no longer the one in control. He wasn't even sure if he ever had been. The night felt endless, the shadows stretching long and dark as the air inside the tent thickened with every passing moment. His mind was clouded with confusion, fear, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. The alien woman stood before him, her gaze unwavering, her presence a constant pressure on his chest. He had made a mistake, one he couldn't undo, and now he was trapped by his own kindness, by the warmth he had offered her. But it was clear now that warmth had never been what she sought. "Do you see now?" she whispered, her voice as cold as the night itself. "You think you understand, but you don't. You can never truly understand what I am." Her words pierced him, each one a sharp, dissonant note in the symphony of his fear. She was no longer just a lost traveler. She was something far more dangerous, far more powerful. And he was nothing but a tool in her hands, a pawn in her game. The realization stung, but it also fueled something inside him, a flicker of anger, a desperate need to break free. Without warning, the man lunged toward her, his hands shaking but determined. He wasn't sure what he could do, but he had to try. He had to fight back, to regain control. But she was faster, far faster than he had anticipated. In one fluid motion, she stepped back, her eyes gleaming with amusement as she watched him struggle. "You think you can escape?" she asked, almost mockingly. "You invited me in. You've already made your choice." The words felt like a curse, heavy and final. And he faltered for a moment. Was it really too late? Was there no way to undo what had been done? His heart raced, and panic began to rise within him like a tide, threatening to overwhelm him. He could feel the walls closing in, the reality of his situation crushing him under its weight. But then, something in him snapped. He couldn't give in, not now, not when he had come so far. There had to be a way out. His hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening as he took a deep breath. She had underestimated him, underestimated his will to survive. "Maybe you're right," he said, his voice steady now, the fear transforming into something harder, something more dangerous. Maybe I did invite you in, but I'm not going down without a fight. The alien woman didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, a cold, calculating smile. Oh, you'll fight, she said softly. But it won't change anything. I already have what I need. Her words sent a chill down his spine, but he refused to back down. He had to believe there was a way to outsmart her, a way to turn the tables. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming his life, reclaiming his humanity. As he stood there, facing her with nothing but his will to fight, he realized one thing: the night was far from over, and whatever happened next, he would not let her take everything from him.